this is getting dangerous. I mean, that was 6 years ago, and they've doubled the capacity, and this is just what they've announced.
Quantum computers can lead to what's called Q-Day, or I prefer to call it Digital Disaster Day, D-Day 2.
Let's talk about the biggest risks.
Combine that with AI, makes it even twice as scary. Can you imagine an AI swarm of multiple AIs working with quantum network?
That's actually insane.
Who's prepared for Q-Day? This could be one of the biggest events in history. 25 years ago, we had a big scare with Y2K, and Y2K to me was like a fire drill, whereas this is like a city on fire. It's exponentially worse.
All right, quantum computers are going to destroy society as we know it. We got that to look forward to. But let's back up and explain first what quantum computers actually are and how they're different from what we have now. Because I think a lot of people just assume quantum computers are like better semiconductors.
Quantum computers actually are a real step in evolution in the way that everybody knows about a binary state, zeros and ones, on and off. Well, that was and is the technology for the classic computers today. The thing about quantum computers, and that allows them to be able to make such radical leaps, is that they can exist in what's called a superposition state of being basically on and off at the same time. So if you imagine it's a coin, a regular computer, you flip a coin, it's going to be heads, it's going to be tails. A quantum computer can actually break down that it's both heads and tails at the same time. So it's like it's the ability to see all of the answers at once, because it can assume all of the different states. And it gets pretty technical as far as that goes with the superpositioning and the qubits and all of that. And but basically, let's just say if a regular computer is a Volkswagen Bug, a quantum computer is an F1 racer. And the abilities of the quantum computers really haven't even been touched yet. That's the impressive thing, because we haven't had the technologies and the materials to be able to do it. There's no standardization. That's the amazing thing. Some of these quantum computers, I see them, they look like beautiful sculptures that cost millions and billions of dollars. And other ones you see look almost like a kid's high school science experiment with cans and strings and stuff hanging out.
Okay.
But it's a huge leap in technology, and it's only going to get better. And the thing is, I had a speaking engagement recently, and the title was sort of clickbaity, because we were talking about how quantum computers can lead to what's called Q-Day, or I prefer to call it Digital Disaster Day, D-Day 2, because that's the day when all the digital secrets that the normal computers can't crack through encryption are going to be cracked by quantum computers.
Okay.
And that is really what gets people's attention.
Yeah, we'll definitely get there in a second here. But first, I want to kind of explain what this is, because a lot of people are going, okay, superposition, it has all the answers at the same time. What does that even mean? So quantum computers, it sounds like they can solve really complex problems. I read a bunch of the articles about this that you had sent me prior to the show, and it sounds, according to Wired, they can solve problems, especially things involving simulating, say, molecules, where they do all kinds of things, and they do them really fast, and they can do, and there's billions of them in a small object, and they're all moving in different ways. It would take many lifetimes for our current supercomputers to, say, simulate all of the things that a glass of water could do, maybe, or whatever. But a quantum computer can do all of that in maybe even a few minutes or a few seconds. And
yeah, especially math.
Math, yeah.
That's one of the things, like Google's proved that they had problems that their, supercomputers would take over a century to solve, and the quantum computers can solve them in hours, in minutes, and soon to be seconds.
Wow.
Because they can hold all these states, like basically they don't have to go from one answer to another and discard it. They can basically jump to the answers a lot faster.
Yeah.
I'm trying to really simplify it
Sure.
so it doesn't sound too geeky. And
Well, it makes sense, right? So instead of like position 1 on, position 2 off, position 3 off, position 1 off, position 2 on, position 3 off, position 1 off, position 2 off, position 3 on, instead of doing that times 100 million or whatever for every transistor that's on a semiconductor. I guess they don't use transistors, but you know what I mean. Anything in a semiconductor, they can just do all on and off for all positions all at the same time. So it's not like twice as fast. It's like hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of times faster than our current technology. So this isn't like the next version of something that's going to go in your iPhone that's 10%, 15% faster. This is like taking something and making it thousands, tens of thousands of times faster, and then putting hundreds or even thousands of those on one, I don't know, in one machine. Am I close?
Absolutely. Well, that's really leading into the next level. IBM announced recently their Starling project, where they've announced that they're going to increase the speed of their quantum computer that's one of the fastest in the world now by 20,000 times the computational power and speed of what they're using now. It's a $30 billion project. Companies are really throwing everything at this to be the first to really take it to the next level. And it's not just companies, it's countries too. So that's another fear.
Yeah.
Is the nation states and the bad actors and, terrorists.
We'll definitely get there. I'm curious what real world problems quantum computers will actually solve first, because I know we're going to talk about encryption in a bit here, but what can they actually do? What right now is so complex that our supercomputers are taking forever to use them? But something besides encryption.
Yeah, well, just think about new medicines, and things like molecular biology and material science, where, just moving one or two molecules over, in a simulation can create a new cure for something. So combine that with AI, and boy, we've really got a 1-2 punch that can make humanity take these giant technological leaps that we had no idea could possibly happen. And that's one of the big fears is AI that a lot of people are worried about. Now quantum's coming around the corner. It makes it even twice as scary.
Sure. So I want to pause here for a second. We're going a little bit too fast because people don't understand what these are. So the reason that quantum computers will create life sciences or material science advances is because they can simulate molecules much faster and much more efficiently than regular computers, right? So right now, if you want to find molecules that would create a new drug that might do something in the body, you'd have to try zillions of different combinations. You'd probably have to try a lot of them in the real world with chemicals and substances, because you can't really simulate them that readily with a computer. But a quantum computer could try 10,000, 100,000, a million variations of a molecular structure, and it could do that in like a couple of days, right?
Even faster in some cases.
Even faster. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible where we are now with regular computers, the classic computers, to the early stage quantum computers, to the 10, 15, 20, 30 years where the quantum computers can be. There's one company that's actually made it their mission to make desktop quantum computers.
Huh. So here's the thing. Do we really need that? Like, that sounds all fine and good. And I'm sure somewhere somebody said, why would I need a computer in my pocket? And now we all have them. But a quantum computer that's on my desktop, I don't know, man. Like, what use case does a random person... This sounds almost dangerous. Like, okay, maybe you want a really fast video renderer. Maybe you want to run an AI node in your house that can create video that's really realistic, and you've got this workstation that does that. Okay, that's a legitimate use case, but you can also do that with just a server bank or something like that. Or you could rent that compute online, and you could then download the result to your house. It seems to me... I did a show a couple years ago on synthetic biology where they said you might be able to 3D print molecules and biological things. And that was really cool and interesting, except when a terrorist gets it and uses it to print smallpox, but transmissible in a highly contagious way and resistant to all antibiotics and vaccines, right? It's all fun and good until someone misuses it. This desktop quantum computing sounds like something people would misuse pretty much immediately.
Well, I think you really hit the nail on the head with that one. What could normal people use it for that would change their everyday life? One of the big concerns is the danger, like you said, of it getting into the wrong hands, like hackers, because that's actually one of the biggest issues, is that the terrorists, bad actors, hackers are hoarding the data. They call it harvest now, decrypt later, where they're grabbing all of this data in the hopes that they get their hands on a quantum computer that's powerful enough to actually break these digital secrets, this encryption.
So what problem would you solve first if you had a perfect error-free quantum computer tomorrow in your house? You know, provided that you're not a hacker or a terrorist, you're trying to decrypt confidential stolen information, what actual use would an everyday person have for a quantum computer? Or is it research-based only?
I would have a hard time thinking of something that someone, average person, would use it for and really stretch, the computer. I mean, even what they have now, I'm using a Mac Studio, and it's really hard to even stretch that out because it's so fast. So for an average person, it really doesn't matter. And the quantum computers are not great at, storage. You're not going to use it for storage. So I think what my hope would be is it could extend human lifespans through creating new medicines, through discovering cures for diseases. So for your average person, it sounds great having a desktop quantum computer for everybody like it's a PC, but I can't imagine where it would really take them much further than what we have now. Maybe I'm limited in my imagination.
Well, look, I'm sure we are. I'm sure someone's going to be like, you guys aren't thinking of this. I get it. When we all need our own virtual real universe or something like that in order to survive because we post-apocalypse. But we're in the age of Amazon Web Services, right? So somebody like IBM or Amazon or whatever could actually create a computing center that has several quantum computers, and Pfizer, Merck, Glaxo or Wellcome or whatever it's called now, they can easily rent that on there, run whatever they need to on there, and get the results to their regular studio computers, just like the ones we have now. So it's amazing, and I hope they exist soon. But yeah, everyone having one seems like a silly idea. And I got to imagine these things are fragile, right? Because when you have something that's in superposition, even semiconductors, they can't get too hot. They need to be pretty cold. They need to be cooled in a certain way. If you're running graphics cards, computer geeks, and as we like to call them, they're experts really, or hobbyists. If you're running a kick-ass graphics setup and you're making, let's say, AI-produced video, or you're just gaming super hard, you've got like a liquid-cooled semiconductor, you got liquid-cooled GPUs with fans on them. You've got some serious gear here. A quantum computer, I assume that's got to be kept at the right temperature. It can't be jostled around. It can't be bumped into. You can't rip the plug out. You got to have a power supply that's going, otherwise the whole thing gets destroyed. This is a fine machine. This is a fighter jet type of thing, right? It's not something you can just keep in your basement.
Very sensitive to environmental factors of all kinds right now. And the IBM System 2 is super cooled in its own cryogenic chamber, basically, that's so cold a human couldn't be in there. But when I first started in the early 1980s, the data centers that I worked in were so cold just to keep those regular computers going that things become normalized after a while. And I actually thought of something where an average person would use a quantum computer maybe in the future. And you brought it up with the gaming. Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll have sort of like a holodeck on the Enterprise, right? But people will have that in their homes. They'll have a rec room, especially if they have a lot of money. They'd be able to afford something like that where they could sit in Paris and they're just sitting at a regular table, but it looks like they're in a cafe or a bistro in Paris. Or they could do fighting games, where they're actually doing it with live participants that are holo generated. So, I mean, that could actually happen maybe at the what we call the desktop level now. Maybe someone would buy a quantum computer for that, because certainly our regular computers can't handle all of those calculations now.
It's going to be fascinating it's going to be fascinating to use. I mean, that's the bottom line. I just wonder what a world with practical quantum computers actually looks like for everyday people. And it seems like the first impacts we're going to see is going to be something like, hey, we just found a cure for cancer. Oh, which cancer? All of them. Wait a minute. How long did that take? Well, we've been running research on it for 60, 70, 80 years, but then this computer we plugged all that in there and it did the next century and a half of research in a week.
Yeah. Well, maybe these quantum computers will actually lead to the development of the next level of quantum computers, right? Sort of like AI, building the next AIs that are more advanced than them, and then they upload all of their information as the new AI's baseline. So it sort of will be a step-by-step situation where we can't even imagine where we're going to go with this. I'm at the end of my career. I wish I could see 50 years from now what people are going to be seeing, and hopefully it's all good.
Yeah.
But my goals are life extension, quality of life, medicine, maybe making stronger materials, buildings that are earthquake proof, and also cybersecurity too. If you have quantum computers basically helping develop new cybersecurity methods, maybe that'll help hold out some of the other threats that are coming too.
So here's a question for you. I'm going to try and phrase this in a way because I'm not even sure I understand it myself. So if we know AI takes a ton of compute, right? I get a lot of people saying like, don't use AI for basic searches because it uses way more energy than a Google search. So if AI uses a ton of compute and quantum basically delivers, I don't know, 1 million times the compute for the same amount of square footage or energy or something like that, let's assume. Does that mean the AI is 1 million times more powerful if it's running on a quantum computer, or am I kind of oversimplifying how this all works?
Well, if we look at it this way, one AI by itself is pretty impressive, but we're moving to where we have an AI swarm where they're communicating together. And you had mentioned Pfizer and other companies working through a quantum cloud that a big company will own all the computers and they'll use them as a community cloud. Well, can you imagine an AI swarm of multiple AIs working with a quantum network of quantum computers? So it will be such an exponential progression at that level that I think it's going to make us drive forward technologically so quick that a lot of people are going to have trouble hanging on maybe.
Well, this is how we get Terminators. That's what everybody's thinking, right? This is how we get Skynet.
Yeah, I saw that movie, and that's the first and I think only movie, I think it was 1984, that I went to, and I sat there and I waited and I sat for the next viewing. I watched it twice in a row in a theater. So to me, I grew up on the original Star Trek. I was like 6 or 7 when it got canceled. I remember writing an angry letter to NBC. You canceled my favorite show. Mm-hmm. So basically, a lot of the things that Star Trek imagined, right, are actually happening now, and they become very commonplace. So the things that the futurists of now are imagining, such as what we're talking about with the quantum computers, they might be a basic everyday thing by the time people get used to it and evolve into it. And of course, what the big thing is, Jordan, is if a company's putting $30 billion into a computer, they're not doing it for their health.
Right.
They're doing it for revenue eventually, right?
Hopefully they're doing it for our health,
yes.
actually. But
I hope so.
We'll see.
I think that's going to be one of the great byproducts of it. But they're doing it for the health of a company, and
sure.
Helping humanity is also a byproduct. But if they're putting $30 billion or $50 billion into some computer initiative, what are they going to do? They're going to do exactly what you were saying, which is sell timeshares on these computers. And that's what a lot of people are worried about, that the hackers will go through unethical brokers and actually use these quantum computers for whatever nefarious reasons
Well, for sure.
that they have.
I mean, they're already hackers. All they need to do is hack Merck's account with the quantum cloud and say, we're running a simulation, namely decrypting all these Facebook and banking passwords that we stole. And unless somebody's paying attention to everything that's running and going, that doesn't look right, which... Is somebody paying attention to what Amazon is doing on AWS for every single company that's on there? Absolutely not. So there's very little chance that we're going to catch those people doing it, especially because they want to hide. To be clear, people probably think we're talking about science fiction a little bit. We have quantum computers now. In 2019, Google's quantum lab in Santa Barbara claimed that it had achieved quantum supremacy. Bold statement, but it's a company. Basically, they had a 53-qubit chip that could complete in just 200 seconds a task that would have taken 100,000 conventional computers 10,000 years. Let me say that again. Their computer at Google did something in 200 seconds that would have taken 100,000 regular computers like the ones we have 10,000 years to do. So think of like all of recorded history plus a lot more, a hell of a lot more, actually. And then you need 100,000 computers running for that long, and Google did that in 200 seconds. That's actually insane. That's not even a commercial break for most major TV networks. And this is in 2019, and Google's latest quantum processor, it's called Willow. It has 105 qubits, so basically twice what they had before. And this is getting dangerous. I mean, that was 6 years ago, and they've doubled the capacity. And this is just what they've announced. They might have 200 now, and they're just not saying anything because it breaks down every 5 minutes. So this is moving along, right? This is chugging along.
Yes, and business always is driven by the fact that they can make a lot of money down the line. Look at the internet. When I first heard about the internet, no one was making money on it. It was just... people could browse and they could have bulletin boards, and no one could really envision where it's gone with the streaming and the social networks and the fact that you and I could be talking right now together. And if it's live streamed, hundreds, thousands, millions of people can watch it at the same time, crystal clear. So all of these things that are in the nascent stage, it takes brilliant people to really stretch them out to where we're pushing it to the limit. But there are people that are going to be doing that. I know there's some billionaire somewhere that's thinking they're going to be able to upload their consciousness into an AI somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
And they're going to live forever, and just move bodies. And that's not a stretch, because there's been series like that and movies like that. So whatever we imagine, people are actually trying to do eventually. And you're right. It's a huge mixed bag of possibilities for everybody that are great, and also danger, Terminator level
danger. Yeah. We talked about the whole uploading of consciousness thing with David Eagleman on this show recently, and we talked about kind of the philosophical end of that. Like, okay, if you upload your consciousness, but your body with you in it is still alive on a bed somewhere and you can't move, what do we do with you? Kill you? And then who's the real you? The consciousness in the cloud that's talking like you were when you were 45 doing your podcast? Or is the real you on this bed here? And I think a lot of people go, well, it's kind of both. And, oh, really? Okay. So if we turn off the computer that this one is on, is that okay? Well, no, you're killing me. But not really, because you're in this bed. Okay, then if that's you, then we can unplug the guy in the bed. And it's like, uh-oh, now we got a problem here, right? You wait for the guy in the bed to die, but now we have two yous that have forked, right? Like a cryptocurrency that is forked and is now two separate things. Which one do you turn off? And is it ethical to do that when it's a person and not a Bitcoin fork? So let's talk about the biggest risks of quantum computing, the whole unraveling of society as we know it that we referenced at the top of the show. We talked about what quantum computers could fix. Now let's flip that. What's the first real thing that will break when a quantum computer cracks current encryption? Now, this is a ways down the line. I want to be clear. We have 105 qubits with Willow in order to crack encryption. And you tell me, John, but I think we need like thousands of qubits or potentially even millions to use what's called Shor's algorithm to break the modern encryption that we have.
That's true. That's very true. But let me also state that very routinely, mathematicians have cracked encryption over the years since these digital secrets were invented to keep everything secure. So we've had to improve the algorithms to secure it. So that's nothing new. Encryption has been broken since the beginning. You know, it was good enough to get us to a certain point, and then it would get cracked. Some good mathematicians with newer technology and better computers could actually crack that encryption, so it would have to be superseded. Well, same thing here. All of the things that we're using right now are great for now, but you're forecasting what happens when there's thousands of qubits or a cluster of quantum computers working in tandem with AI. How long will it take them to solve these math problems? And that's really the basis of the whole issue. Is all the digital encryption, for the most part, is based on math. And did you ever see Prime Target, the Apple Plus series?
I haven't. I was going to. What I was going to say is this reminds me of that movie, The Imitation Game, where they're decrypting the Nazi encryption, and they managed to do it, and it's like this huge turning point in the war, because they can hear what the Germans are doing and saying, and they don't let on, right, that they've done this. I haven't seen Prime Target. Tell me what you can give the analogy. I watch very few things. I think a lot of people probably have seen whatever show you're talking about.
It was #1, so I'm not really publicizing it while it was running. But basically, it's a math genius at the level of Newton in Cambridge, England, and he's looking for what he calls the prime finder. And this prime finder, according to every intelligence agency in the world, will be able to help him solve the problem of decrypting everything that we have now. So it's a very dramatic show with all kinds of crazy things happening, and very dramatic, a lot of murders and things blowing up and all of that. Very exciting. That's probably what draws people in. But the premise is actually quite true. That's the interesting thing, is that a lot of people are afraid that these quantum computers, being so good at math and basically patterns and recognition and seeing all of these answers simultaneously, will be able to crack the encryption. That's where my company is kind of different. We use quantum mechanics instead, so it's not math-based. So I won't go into that so much, but basically it's quantum versus quantum. And the government's been working on this for quite a while. NIST, National Institute Standards and Technology, they've come up with 4 approved encryption algorithms, basically, but still they have this Achilles heel that they generated at the basis from math. So it takes a whole different way of thinking to solve these whole new level of problems. And that's basically been true of mankind all through history, right? When we come up with something that is great in science, sometimes there's negative things that happen. And one of the negative things that people are worried about with AI is the Terminator scenario you mentioned. With quantum, it's the digital encryption and the digital secrets being revealed. And 25 years ago, we had a big scare with Y2K. And Y2K, to me, was like a fire drill, whereas this is like a city on fire. It's exponentially worse.
Yeah, let's talk about this. So first of all, what is Q-Day? You mentioned before the show we were talking, this is like, it's sort of like the singularity kind of, but when encryption fails to be able to prevent quantum decryption, is that what we're dealing with here?
Well, as far as singularity, that's at the point where everything comes together sort of in this tipping point of the qubits are in the thousands, multiple quantum computers may be involved, maybe we have AI helping, and that's when the real fear of the digital encryption being broken is almost, it's not if, it's when, basically. So that's why everyone's been scrambling, and the government actually has regulations where all of the agencies have to be quantum prepared.
Jeez.
So they give them timelines. Ro Khanna, the congressman in my state of California, actually put up this bill, HR 7535, that became the Quantum Computer Cybersecurity Preparedness Bill and Act, and it was passed in December of 2023. So they have their marching orders, the government, right now to get ahead of the game. And really, businesses are struggling because they're dealing with AI and just regular cybersecurity issues of phishing, right?
Right.
You know, the people clicking on the email or getting a text. So, you know, it's a stacked deck here with adding all these components so quickly. We've improved technologically much faster than we have been able to, as a society, come up with ways to prevent the harm that's coming up.
So what is Q-Day? I think people still don't understand what Q-Day actually is and means.
Yeah, Q-Day is just basically the day that encryption is cracked by the quantum computers. So basically, say you have online banking, suddenly you look in, your online banking account zeroed out. Why? Because it was secured by encryption and the encryption got broken. And that's one of the fears. Another one's getting into the utilities, right? And shutting down electrical grids and water plants, anything you can imagine. Everything is secured by digital secrets, which we know as digital encryption. And this encryption, once it starts falling, who knows where the cascade will be. And like you said, no one's going to announce that they broke it, right? Because they can keep getting the benefits of it. No one will even know that they've solved this problem. So look at the military and the government applications alone, where a hostile country, to not just us, but to anybody, gets their military secrets. Suddenly, like you had mentioned with Enigma from World War II and that movie Imitation Game, they didn't announce that they had broken the German encryption. They just listened in and were there before the Germans were deployed. Same thing here. They're not going to announce that they are in our banking system or that they're in our military facilities or that they have access to nuclear plants. So that's really the scariest scenario to me, is the fact that these other really countries, because to us, they're hostile and they're bad actors and they're terrorists, but to their country, they're a hero, they're a patriot. So I actually worked with a lot of people from the former Soviet states when they were broken up. And my God, they had master's degrees, PhDs were common, and they're making such little money compared to what Americans would expect. So how good would it be if your country tells you you'll be a patriot to help us get into this other country's facilities or their military secrets? We'll give you an apartment. We'll take care of your family. You're going to make 10 times what you were making before. Your life, you'll have a car, and everyone looks at you like you're a super patriot. So when we flip the switch like that and look at it from that angle, that's why it's so easy to recruit these super great people, because they don't think they're doing anything wrong. They think they're helping their country. So that's one of the scariest things about it.
Sure. Well, I was originally going to ask, when were you expecting this to happen? I am curious what the timeline looks like for that, but I guess it could have happened. In theory, it could have happened already, and we just don't know about it because China or whatever is busy decrypting state secrets. They're not crashing Bitcoin or doing something obvious. They're not posting more Jeff Bezos dick pics, right? They're in there making sure that they can read our communications. So, but what is the timeline? If we got 53 qubits in 2019 and then in 2025 we got 105, are we looking at an exponential rise here? Are we looking at this in 10 years? Is it in 5 years, or is it sooner?
Well, 5 years ago, say some computer models were run that said it would be 20 years down the line before the quantum computers were able to do this. But look what's happened in the last 5 years. We didn't know anything about AI. OpenAI was not even on the radar.
Right.
that's turned business completely upside down. Agentic AI, what's that done to what you had mentioned before about the energy requirements? Because it's not sleeping, it's not waiting for a prompt, it's actually going out on its own, and it's constantly awake and ready to, take in information. So the energy requirements of that have exploded. So with that 20-year timeline, even people that were very negative about, well, it's far out in the future, don't worry about it till we get there, they're actually pulling in and stepping back and saying, well, I was wrong about the timeline. And, now that we have AI also contributing to it, it's kind of telescoping down the timeline, where some people are saying 5 years, some people are saying 10 years, some people are, still saying 15 years, but it's anybody's guess. And like you said, some advances may have happened already that are sort of breaking the encryption at the lowest level. There have been some indicators that lower level encryption has been already broken by the earlier quantum computers. So
wow.
It doesn't take a genius to figure out that the way this is speeding along, all these technologies, that in a few years, no one can really tell. I hope it's a little longer just for society's sake, so that we do have time to prepare. And I live in California, and probably 8 or 9 out of 10 people aren't prepared for the earthquakes. And we have earthquakes all the time. The big one has been threatened since I was here in 1977, and we've had some pretty bad quakes. But I know tons of people aren't really ready for it. I've got pets, so I have water and I've got the medicine and all of that. And in fact, that brings us to Q Day. Who's prepared for Q Day? And it's actually the doomsday preppers. They're prepared for everything. Mm-hmm. So if the utilities go out, or if they're having problems, they're already halfway off the grid anyway. So they're actually much more prepared for something they may not even consider or know about right now. But they may be preparing for an alien invasion or a government overthrow, or, some other thing that you and I aren't even worried about. But they're actually stocked up and ready to go for Q Day or a digital disaster day that will really change the way we live. Because I like to eat. And the supply chain for food is pretty fragile. You saw during COVID, right? What would we run out of? Bleach, gloves, disinfectant, anything that was related to that, masks. And just imagine if some hacker starts ransomwaring the small providers that provide food and different things, and they're kind of locked out. And now the big grocery chains, they're stuck because they depend on the small providers to get them their resources. So basically, it's only a matter of time before you start running out of things. So I like to eat. I like to have my lights on. I like to have water. I like the toilet to flush, all of those things. And this could be one of the biggest events in history if something cataclysmic happens.
So will it be cataclysmic, or is this going to be slow bleed, right? Because I suppose it depends on what the other actor does, right? If we have China get this and they really want to take us down, they turn off the electricity, they screw up the water, they break the banking system, they break the credit card and SWIFT financial system, they crash the stock market all at the same time. But that's not really to their advantage, right? Because their financial system crashes at that point too. And if we find out it's them, well, nuclear missiles, unless they control all of those, and they can't be sure that they do,
right.
Then those start to fly when they've done something like this, and we can say that it is them. So it seems unlikely that it's going to be like, oh my gosh, this is like a nuclear attack, but digital. It seems more likely that it's just going to be a death by 1,000 paper cuts, where it's like, wait, why is the stock market behaving kind of weird? And then we find out 10 years later that it is being manipulated by quantum computers. Why did cryptocurrency crash? Well, there was a sell-off. Yeah, why did that start? Well, an exchange went down. But why did the exchange go down? Well, we find out 15 years later, or 5 years later, or a year later, whatever, that it was hacked. Okay, but how? Well, quantum computers. Like, you'd have to do so many things at once, and it's almost to their advantage to not do it all at once, to just keep us on the back foot for a decade instead.
Right. It really would be. I mean, I'd say the percentages are probably 95% slow bleed and do that, and maybe 1 to 5% that some crazy dictator gets, in charge of a country that has the ability to do something, at that cataclysmic level. So there's always that possibility, but I think you're right. I think it's lower. I think things are going to happen, but what happens when it happens in multiple sectors at the same time? Or
right.
What happens when you're on an airplane and plane loses connection with the air traffic controllers and you're flying blind and every plane around you is, flying blind? Well, that's pretty cataclysmic.
It could be, but believe it or not, I'm pretty sure pilots have thought about what happens if their radios go out, right? It's not been, I would like to think that the lights do something. I'm no pilot, but I think that the windshield and everything is there for a reason. It won't be as efficient as centralized air traffic control, but yeah, the lights and other methods of communication.
Well, it's happened though. It happened a few months ago in Newark. For 90 seconds, they lost connections to air traffic control, and it wasn't a big hacking incident. It was just a telecom outage.
Jeez. Windows update. Always at the worst time.
Yes. So, we have precedent here of what 90 seconds could do and the chaos that created, because hundreds of flights are going into a major airport like that. So if they want to ransomware something major, that would get everyone's attention really quick. And that's where I think the lower level people would do it. That wouldn't be a country really doing something like that. They would be more like the strategy and let's get in here, get some information, not let them know and this and that. But when you're dealing with hackers, who knows, right? They could have some kind of death wish or mental illness, or, they're just going to go for it, or they're an anarchist. They want to see everything burn. I mean, Nero was emperor of Rome. Why was he fiddling when Rome was burning, right? I mean, there's crazy personalities everywhere. So that's one of the things that worries me, is that the human factor is always going to be the weakest link, and we never know who's going to, do what. So,
I suppose another reason not to give quantum computers to everybody, but I'm just far less worried about Iran or even Russia, where soldiers don't have socks and food, being able to develop a quantum computer that can do much of anything compared to what Google can muster or the NSA can muster. And I get it. It probably won't take that much longer, but it wouldn't be possible to verify that any digital transmission from money transfers to telephone calls are genuine, which means they can't really be made, right? At least financial transfers and things like that. That would grind things to a halt. But again, I wonder if we wouldn't be able to pinpoint Q-Day until it's been 5 years since it happened, right? Because you go, that's why all this, it's going to take an investigation. It's going to take CIA, NSA, FBI, and who knows, maybe other nation states helping us, the Five Eyes, to finally figure out, okay, the reason all this weird stuff has been happening and being hidden is because the Chinese have an AI running on a quantum computer that we couldn't, it's just really good at hiding its tracks. Breaking classical cryptography, payment records would be exposed, personal identifying information, national secrets, all communications, of course. You mentioned Y2K before. I think some people are going, yeah. I remember when Y2K bug was going to shut down all the software. Why is this different from that giant, expensive false alarm? I mean, the obvious thing for me is it's been a quarter century and now everything is on a computer and the internet versus just some stuff. So that's the big thing. But I don't know, man. Y2K, kind of a big nothing burger, wasn't it? Was it not?
Yeah, it was a nothing burger, cost $500 billion to make it that way, and 5 years of preparation. It was a really simple problem, too. The worry was that the computers were hard-coded, some of the dates, so that when we hit the year 2000, instead of rolling over from 1999 to 2000, it would revert back to 1900, because they had limited space in those computers in those days. So they hard-coded the 1 and the 9, never thinking their programs would be used all the way to the year 2000. And sure enough, they were. So that was really, there was a defined date, there was a defined problem, and it still took $500 billion and something like 400 million person hours in a worldwide effort between governments and companies to make this happen. And we're not seeing that with Q-Day, this impending digital disaster. There's no worldwide effort. There's no, attention and groupthink with companies getting together. But I think it's starting to happen more and more because the mainstream media, Wall Street Journal, Wired, that article that you read, Forbes, they're talking about it more and more. So it's not on the fringes. Even the naysayers are saying it's going to happen. They just predict it may be further out. But the disaster, like you said, that was 25 years ago. There was no social media, no online banking. There was no, stock market where you could just buy things by computers. Right. Everything was sort of internal to the businesses. So that would affect society for sure. But I had one guy that showed up who worked for me, a network engineer, showed up with his kids in an RV on Y2K night. We were all in the data center because I had 42 offices and data centers that I managed around the world. And we had like 40 people in our main data center in Los Angeles watching as we hit the year 2000. And okay, we're okay here, we're okay here. But this guy actually brought in an RV because he was convinced the lights would go out, the traffic lights, and the utilities would go down. So I didn't know this till later, but he was bringing other employees out there to show them the guns that he had. So, other people just went home. It was a regular, okay, right. It was a big thing. It's over. Thank God. And this guy's, so over prepared that his kids in an RV with guns out there too, showing other people. So that's kind of the extremes that I've seen.
And on Monday, he walked into the office. Does anybody need 600 cans of chili, freeze-dried noodles, astronaut ice cream, or 9mm rounds? I have a lot, and they're in the parking lot right now. Get them while they're hot. The guy was proud. That guy's still selling canned chicken noodle soup out of the back of his garage in his retirement days.
Yes, I lost track of him because, you can't be doing that. You can't be bringing guns to work and bringing employees out there.
So he didn't actually come in on Monday. That was his last day.
No, he did. I didn't know about it till he left. He actually left, got another job later. But I didn't find out about it till after he left and said, "Did you know he did that?" I was like, "What?" No one said a word to me. If you want to find him, look for the Facebook Marketplace ad for pallets of freeze-dried noodles and carrots. Then you can find him that way. He has a bunker, under his house, ready to roll.
That's right.
I mean, it's just you can't tell with people. And like I said, the doomsday preppers, which he'd probably even in a category. But here's a guy that's in the middle of technology that know all the things we were putting into it, that saw the money, all the effort. And he was still convinced that it was all going to go to hell. So,
yeah. So he's not alone. I mean, where is the arms race in quantum happening today? So I'm assuming we're looking at Google, we're looking at China, we're looking at the NSA, so nation state level type of stuff, maybe in France or European, the UK. Where is it happening, and what sort of status are we at, and who's winning, do you think?
Whoever has the most money is winning, because it's not a poor man's game to be playing at this level. Universities are doing their quantum computers, and since they almost have, the top brilliant minds there, and they can cut the labor costs, by having everyone work. Who knows what they could do, and people get excited. So there's always breakthroughs from universities, but you're right. You mentioned all the top players. You didn't mention Microsoft. They have Major N1, their quantum chip, Google with the Willow chip, China, United States government, of course. So those are the major players, and it takes a lot of money. IBM, of course, they kind of shift who's 1 to 5. They make an announcement and they're moved up, or they solve a problem that gets worldwide recognition, like the Google computer that solved that math problem that would take so long, in hours. They moved up to number 1 for a while. But who knows with China, right? They basically have unlimited resources. They have some of the most brilliant physicists in the world, and they have a definite motivation to move up there. So they kind of are there too. So that's really who it is. The major countries, the major players, but you discounted Russia. I wouldn't discount Russia because, the fact that their soldiers don't have socks and, the problems you mentioned, that's sort of a supply and demand problem. The one thing they don't have a problem with is brain power, okay? And creativity. Just look at what they did in the arts all of those years. So you combine creativity with people that have been studying computer science for 20, 30 years and mentoring the newer, younger people that are coming up. So I really couldn't discount them either,
Interesting. It's the brain drain from Russia has been so extreme. I just wonder if they can keep up with that. Because if you're a quantum scientist in Russia right now and you have a chance to work for a corrupt regime that maybe can't even compensate you adequately, or you can go work at Google. I mean, there's a lot of Russians in my area that work at Google, and Belarusians, and people from Central Asia, the former Soviet states, and China for that matter. And when I talk to them, they are not planning on going home. Like, you know what I mean? In fact, we had some neighbors. I won't say what nationality they are, but they had to go back to renew their passports, and they just applied for asylum instead. And they work at Google. They were just like, hey, if we go back home, there's a really good chance they're not going to let us leave again. And right. The U.S. government agreed with them, and they still live in our neighborhood. Well,
everything they learned while they were at Google or IBM or Microsoft that is related, like you said, that's a talent pool that if they go back there could instantly be tapped with just a little bit of social pressure. It's nothing new that governments have pressured families, not the person themselves maybe, but their families, and that makes the person feel the pressure too. So there's all these other reasons. There's all these reasons why people will do what they do. First is money, right? Number one is money, but second is, money. I guess family would be first for me and most people, but you get the money to help your family, and that's a real driver too.
The carrot is usually more powerful than the stick, but we do hear about people's families in, say, China being pressured, and you'll even hear people say, I got a call from my grandma in China, and she says I need to stop talking about Xi Jinping online or whatever. It's really crazy. We forget where we live sometimes, and the government doesn't do that stuff yet. You mentioned before, harvest now, decrypt later, meaning adversaries are already hoarding data to crack later once they have quantum firepower. So I've heard that China is doing this. I assume a lot of countries are probably doing something like this. What exactly are they grabbing? They're grabbing what, passwords for banking or financial data? What else?
Government secrets, military secrets, IP, intellectual property. If you want to move up really quick on a design on something and you don't have the resources to start it from scratch yourself, but you get the blueprint on how someone else did it, you can back engineer it, maybe even make it a little better. That's always a risk. But just look at the military applications of, we don't know what's going on as U.S. citizens, right? As weapons development and all these big advances that they made. Can you imagine what the other countries that really aren't favorable with us right now, if they could get their hands on that? What they would do. Like you had mentioned, really, the fact that the British got the German locations and their secrets, look how that changed the whole war. World War II, they could fake that they were going to one beach head and Germans were already there, and instead they go to Normandy, right? So, little things like that disinformation is as powerful and even more powerful sometimes as information. So that's really key.
Is there a such thing as quantum resistant cryptography? So like they can break our encryption. Is there quantum resistant encryption that we can use? Does that exist?
Well, the NIST algorithms that have been considered quantum safe, quantum resistant, there's 4 of those. And they were developed over 9 years as competition. Tons and tons of attempts were made, but they've finalized it down to these 4. And that's what the government is looking for. It's called PQC, post-quantum cryptography. So that's what companies have to kind of factor in to migrate over to the post-quantum cryptography rather than what they've been depending on. all of these years, and it's not going to be easy for them. And that's kind of why we're in business, is to make it easier, you know?
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, the problem is, look, you can you can make a new version of Windows where everything is quantum resistant, but how do you easily upgrade a satellite, nuclear weapons, military hardware, submarines, nuclear submarines, whatever, energy grid stuff? There are hospitals and energy grid stuff running software from 1995 or even before that, because it's not necessarily on the web, or it is, but this is what they use to run the energy system, and it's not as easy to just update all that stuff. You can't just plug in a CD-ROM and update it. Not that anything uses that anymore, but you can't just do that, right? It's not the AOL days. That stuff was installed using floppy disks, and it runs on Cobalt, you know, or something. Not anything modern. How long do you think the changeover for infrastructure would take to post-quantum encryption? Is that something that can be done in a couple of years, or is it going to take a decade?
You've really gone to the heart of the problem, Jordan. It's so massive a problem. You really have to start with the critical sectors, like you had mentioned, of healthcare and anything that really is what we depend on to survive. I think those would need to get the priority. Would Facebook, be a priority? Would YouTube be a priority? Maybe lower down, but the scale of this problem is so huge, and we haven't really been attacking it yet, that if the quantum computers actually start decrypting it, we're going to be playing catch up for a long time. And it can be easy or it can be hard as far as making the changes. A company that's just starting out, a startup, if they start with the quantum resistant, quantum safe algorithms right from the start, then they're in much better shape than a massive company that has tons of different types of encryption styles in their environment. So there's really no timeline. It's that companies should have started already, and many of them have. But for the smaller businesses that are just looking to get revenue and grow, cybersecurity itself is so far behind in their thoughts. It's just a money loser, right? It's just overhead. So to even think about the quantum component on top of that, it's really not in their thoughts so much. So we have to focus on the bigger institutions, the government, the military, the larger companies that handle utilities, that handle healthcare. I mean, it's really a mind-boggling problem. Finance, everywhere you turn, we're integrated with digital secrets now. That's really what makes the world go round.
Yeah, it seems like the only upside here is that ultimately the best way to stave off Q Day, it may be to share the benefits around, right? We take the better batteries and the miracle drugs and the far-sighted climate forecasting, and we use them to build better societies, new materials, and better lives for everyone. Or, let the scramble begin and make it a zero-sum game, which is kind of how we've been operating so far, unfortunately.
Right. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. But in this case, we either survive together or we go down together in many respects. And I think what's going to happen is, like with us and the companies that are our competitors, even if we all scaled up, we wouldn't be able to handle the problem because it's so massive. And we do have part of the solution, a really critical part of the solution, but we're going to have to have other companies license our technology and the bigger ones sort of support us to get it out there, because it's really, horrifying to think what can happen. I try not to think of it so negatively, but really it all the doomsday preppers actually are onto something. If this does happen in the next few years, then we're really going to be in big trouble. That's why I'm sort of an evangelist out there trying to speak on it and let people know this is a major problem. We can't just stick our head in the sand like ostriches and hope it goes away, because it's not. Because for every person that's stepping back and saying, yeah, it's over my head, I can't do it, there's 10 more that are moving forward for whatever their reasons are.
John Young, thank you very much. Hopefully this technology stays in the realm of research and makes us some miracle drugs and some amazing machines without taking the rest of us down is collateral damage. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Jordan. It's been a real pleasure.